We are recording.
All right. All right, my computer's moving slow. Hold on. There we go. All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. Just for a point of order for this evening, if you'll recall, while we're doing the Zoom meetings, the virtual meetings, there are no audience delegations. We'll resume those once we are able to do in-person meetings again. And now we need a motion for the preview and approval of the agenda.
Meyer, move to approve.
Nancy, second.
You want me to do roll call vote on everything, Tina?
Please, yeah, I think that's easiest.
Okay, Nancy,
Yes.
Doug A,
Yes.
Doug Meyer,
Yes.
Brittany,
Yes.
Bing,
He's muted.
Yes.
Cameron,
Yes.
Tina.
Yes.
Thank you.
Need a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Nancy, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Bing with the second.
All right, Cameron,
Yes.
Brittany,
Yes.
Bing,
Yes.
Doug Meyer,
Yes.
Doug A,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Tina.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, student recognition. Is there a video of that, Paul?
We didn't have a video yet. I think.
Okay.
One of
Yeah.
the students is quarantined.
Gotcha. I remember reading that now. So the two students are Emily Gray and Kennedy Atkinson. So when that video is available, if everybody could go out and watch that.
It'll be on next month's with the student of the month for next month.
Perfect. Okay, monthly information items. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? Okay. Moving on to the assessment and evaluation of district programs.
Let's get Deb on here. There you go, Deb.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, just a few notes for January. We are at about 58% of our year is complete. So in relation to that, we're looking at current year property taxes, of course. We're pretty much in last month, 98% there. We also received our M&M surtax, state railroad and utility payments. Are pretty close to budget there. Prop C revenues are at 55.9%. State revenues are at 51.7%. Overall, in the general operating and special funds, we're at about 71.4% of budget. On the expenditure side, we are looking at 48.5% in our general operating and special revenue funds. Overall, our fund balance is at about 42% in relation to our goal of about 20 to 25%. And for total cash and investments are at 25.3 million. 10.7 of that million is in bond proceeds. So looking at roughly a little over 20 or a little over 14 million for our cash. Looking good, I think. state revenues are down a little bit. I think, and Paul, maybe correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think that they're being conservative on those and will make up for it towards the end of the fiscal year.
They usually do. We still have the withholding from July that has not been released. That's about $300,000. So they haven't stated when that's going to get released, but I anticipate that I think they may counter it with ESSER funds again and then just leave it out. I'm not sure what the governor has planned. He hasn't really released that information yet. But yes, they still are conservative with that for sure until the end.
Yeah.
All right, anybody have any questions for Deb? Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
And now the Library and Media Center program.
Bring Christy on here, and I think once I get her on. Christy, can you unmute now?
Yes.
Okay, hang on just a second. Where'd you go? Okay, you're co-host, so you can share your screen.
All right, I think you're ready.
Okay. So you should have read through this. I just want to highlight some of the items from here. Under the special engagements, we have put an asterisk next to the engagements that have been put on hold due to COVID. But I did want to highlight that our librarians have done a fantastic job of getting books into the hands of our children, whether it was during the pandemic back in March or now with our virtual learners. Most of our librarians are having those virtual learners come pick up books from the school or delivering them to them. So they are doing a fantastic job of making sure that our kids in our community have books to read. The other thing that I want to highlight is some of the recommendations. They work very, very well together. We are moving from monthly meetings to quarterly, and really they get along. They will just reach out to each other as often as they need to, and they go way above what they need to make sure that they support that student achievement and they provide assistance to our teachers with those curricular needs. They have a great way they're great leaders in technology and integrating that into the classrooms. High school, Jeannie Waring is fantastic with technology and helps her teachers any way they can to use technology in their classroom. They had some concerns and recommendations. Professional development, that's always a concern with a lot of our staff. And so they keep working with the principals to go to visit other progressive libraries in the areas to stay current of those trends and practices. Another concern was staffing. They know that, well, as you know, some of the positions at McEwen in the middle school were cut in half. The high school aide position was eliminated. Of course, they always recommend they would like to have those positions back, but understand the fiscal responsibility. So they do a great job of staying within their budget. Even when their budget was cut, they still do a good job of looking for resources used to provide for our teachers and students. They did have contract days, the extended contract days, and it's on there, and I talked to them. Most of them are doing fine without it. They would like to see those be brought back, but again, I nicely told them that we are being physically responsible for them. But again, they do a fantastic job, and this is a hard area to change. Libraries are the books are in the libraries, so it's hard for them to do things differently. But they have really pivoted well and have found different ways to get books and to get kids into literature, whether it's ebooks or regular books. Any questions?
I don't have any. Anybody else have any?
I just had a question. This is Nancy. I was wondering if there was any way you could use student aides or volunteers in that instead of hiring staff to help in the library. Is that a possibility?
Well, I think on a normal year it would. Right now, we're not allowing volunteers to come into our buildings.
No, right. I just mean
Yeah.
in the future. In the future.
I think definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Anybody else have anything for Christy? Very good. Thank you, Christy. Oh, my computer is awesome. All right. My internet at work is so much faster than home, and I expect it to be like it is at work here. It's not the way that works. All right. How about the student data presentation? No, assessment and evaluation of district programs. How about we do that?
No, we did that. You're on
We
student.
just did that? Okay, sorry. We
You're
are
on-
doing the student data presentation.
Yep.
I'm back.
You're back. Welcome back.
So I sent you my presentation on Fastbridge. And so I just want to kind of go through that. Fastbridge is a universal screener, and what that is it's a brief assessment that is administered 3 times a year, and we use it to identify students who struggle, and also to start our MTSS process, which is our multi-tiered support system. So it's that intervention time that we try to fill in gaps that kids may be missing in order to be able to reach those grade level standards. This year we are assessing K-6. 3 times a year, and next year we'll be adding 7th and 8th graders. So the purpose of a universal screener is, first of all, for us to see those levels of data from the district to the building down into the classroom. It's also a good way for us to measure external data versus internal data. So we've always used map testing to do that, but we all know how reliable map testing is when the kids take a test 1 time a year, and that's the only thing we have. And so this is a good way to monitor the external data 3 times a year. It's helpful for us, like I said, to identify or predict students who may be at high risk so that we can intervene early. And it's a good way to do some fidelity checks on the new resources that we bought. If we are only using the resources for assessment, then we can't see if our resources are working. But I've had some great conversations with all the grade levels who are saying that what we're seeing in Fastbridge is what they're seeing in the classroom, which is good, meaning that our resources are measuring the same thing that our external data is measuring as well. These are the 4 types of assessments that we use for screening. The A reading and A math is for students in 2 through 6th grade. 2nd through 6th grade. They are adaptive assessments, which means they change, the questions change as the kids answer correctly or incorrectly. So as they answer correctly, they get harder. As they answer incorrectly, they get easier until the computer can figure out kind of where they're at. The early reading and early math is for our kindergarten and 1st graders. It has 12 subtests. They're not all used at each screening period, but they talk about anything early reading. So your sight words, your letter sounds, your letter names. In math, it includes your numbers, your sequencing, your decomposing, those types of early skills that we like to see in kindergarten and 1st grade. There are more assessments. There are a lot of assessments in Fastbridge that teachers can dig into and to use to monitor progress with interventions, which is our goal for next year, is to really show the progress monitoring in this program as well. But these are just the 4 ones that we give for our screeners. So this is the data that I look at, and this is how I look at it. I always start with our district data, and then I go down further and further until I get to the cohort. I've led principals through all this data, including their building data, their grade level data, and their cohort. But for this presentation, we're just looking at district and cohort. So the next few slides are just the assessments and are the scores and the assessments. I'm going to go kind of quickly through these charts because hopefully you've had a chance to look at them. Please stop me at any time and ask questions. Otherwise, I'll just kind of go through them. So this is our early reading and early maths. This is just first and second, our kindergarten and first graders. Here's our below grade level, and here's our grade level in early math and then early reading from the fall of 2019 to the winter of 2021. And then here is a different way for a visual. I'm more of a line graph person, so I like these. Here is A math and A reading. Again, this is grades 2 through 6. The asterisk means that first grade joins this assessment each winter. So that's why those asterisks are there. And again, here's the line graph. Right here would be a new cohort of kiddos. And so, I mean, it's still district, but. And then the cohort data, so groups of kiddos. So here is current first graders. They were tested last fall and winter. Of course, we would have loved to have had a spring testing, but we weren't in school. And so you'll see on and above grade level on the left and below grade level on the right. These are the first graders that missed a huge chunk of kindergarten, and it shows in their scores. They missed a lot of their letters that they weren't able to learn in school. We did as much as we could virtual, and so we're kind of seeing that dip in the data. Here are our current second graders. And third graders.
Christy, without having the kids having had school all spring and knowing that they're behind this year, is there a projection on when they should be caught up? I mean, is that something we even really know at this point?
Well, and what you see, and I'm gonna kind of go back because we saw a big dips in like the first graders, but really in the other cohorts, we didn't see a huge dip in the other grades. And so that made us really hopeful that they didn't lose as much as we thought they were going to. In fact, when you get down into individual data, just student individual data, it's really interesting that some of our scores increased between winter and fall. And so I don't think we lost as much as we thought we were going to.
Okay.
So I think teachers were very cognitive of that at the beginning of the year and tried to figure out what maybe they had missed. Also, I know that fourth grade was a huge year of third grade that they missed, which was multiplication. So when fourth grade got to multiplication, knowing that those kids hadn't had any of that, they had to kind of slow down and kind of go backwards a little bit and fill in some of those gaps before they started that unit. So they did a great job of thinking about that before each unit.
Okay.
Here's our fifth graders. I mean, we did have some great jumps too. So I want to highlight the successes we've had in our programs as well. Sixth graders didn't take it in the fall just because with all the craziness of coming back to school, they didn't think it was something to add one more thing to their plates. So we don't have data for that. So some of the things we to consider, we have brought in 2 new resources for K-5, a reading one and a math one. And there is lots of research on resource implementation dips, that when you bring in a new resource, you're gonna see dips just because it's new. These 2 resources are very rigorous, which is great, but it's something that our teachers have to get used to teaching and our kids have to get used to learning in that way. I have shared this data with building admin. I've shared it with central office admin. I went to grade level meetings where it's been shared, and now I'm sharing it with you. And of course, we have to consider the pandemic and what part it plays in this data as well. Some of our next steps, as you bring on new resources into a district, you have to make sure that we keep up the fidelity of them. It's easy at first for teachers to use a resource, and as they get more comfortable though, sometimes we start sliding off of that because we find other things to use. And so encouraging our principals to make sure to get into classrooms. You know, when you look at fourth grade, try to go into all the fourth grade classrooms. Are we on the same page? Are we using the same language? Are we on the same, pacing guides the same? Also for me, just to pop in and just have those fidelity checks along the way. Me and Annie are really trying to get MTSS started, and we now have teams at all the buildings, and they are meeting on student data. And so our next step is to get interventions. It's really hard right now with interventions because we can't mix groups of kids because of COVID. And so that presents another hurdle, an obstacle for us to overcome. But we are going to monthly meetings to help them figure out how to use data to drive instruction and to intervene with kiddos. Weekly data teams that are happening in the classrooms, again, not only this data, because this data is good data, but it's not the most important data. The most important data is their classroom assessments. And so we are going into those data team meetings, helping them understand how to use that classroom assessment data to drive their instructions and to look for gaps of kiddos. We're continuing Fastbridge up until 8th grade next year. And we're going to continue to evaluate resources. We've done it in K-5, reading and math, and now we'll go up through middle school and high school to make sure we have the best resources for our kiddos. Any questions?
Hey, Christy, this is Bing.
Yes.
Which student took this Fastbridge? Was it only the ones that were in person, or were the virtual students taking the test too?
We did have some 4th and 5th grade students virtually take it, but for the most part, it was only in person.
So we really don't know how far behind the virtual students are.
Correct.
We see the huge drop for the in-person, but we're not measuring the virtual students.
Correct.
Is there a plan to have them tested to see where they're at before they come back into the classroom in person?
We can. What's hard about 1st through 3rd grade is they don't have a classroom teacher because they are through launch. And so our systems pull, Fastbridge pulls our class lists from Clever or from SIS. And because they don't have a classroom teacher, they're not in Fastbridge at this point. Once they enroll in our district, they're enrolled in our district. Once they have a classroom teacher in our district, then we can test them. And we, as kids move into the district, we always give them the Fastbridge assessment first thing.
Anybody else have any questions or comments for Christy? Well, thank you for everything you do. I like the layout. I like the organization. I like the direction. It's very good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christy.
Okay. Revisions to board policy. It's an information item. Everybody have a chance to look that over? Paul, did you have anything to fill in on that?
No, it's just a continuing conversation of as we met to talk about reading intervention with the elementaries. We just need to make some changes to what we're actually what policy needs to reflect what we're actually doing for reading intervention. So that's why that was in there. So.
Paul, it seems like we're doing math intervention as well. Is there another policy on math, or are we just concentrating on reading?
No, that's a good question, Bing. So the policy is related to the statute. So there's actually a statute that requires students, if they don't read within 2 grade levels of their current grade at a certain point that it's a mandatory retention that was enacted quite a few years ago. So that policy is in place because of that statute. There's no statute in terms of grade level placement for math. It's only for reading. So that's why that's only, but we still do, yes, we still do provide math interventions as well.
Thank you.
And in the policy, Paul, Doug Alexander here, in the policy, it mentions, I think at the very end, it says something about summer school maybe, may pull it back up.
Yeah,
Summer school may be offered or required. Just help me understand the required aspect of that. If somebody says, I'm not enrolling my child in summer school or whatever, are they retained then if we required it due to the
So
reading?
that's definitely a possibility. If we're not able to provide the interventions that are going to allow them to fill in those skill gaps, and yes, that's allowing that opportunity. That's what the policy is for.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Any other questions or comments? We will vote on that next month. We need a motion to change the date for the regular meeting in March.
Meyer, so moved.
Brittany, second.
Nancy, second. Pick one.
We got several seconds. Do we have any questions or are we ready to vote?
I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, Nancy,
Yes.
Doug Alexander,
Yes,
Doug Meyer,
Yes.
Bing,
Yes,
Brittany,
Yes.
Cameron,
Yes.
Tina,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the 2021-22 school calendar as presented.
Doug Alexander, so moved.
this is Bing, I'll second.
Any questions on this?
Do you want me to talk about it a little bit?
Yep.
Okay, so the calendar committee met 2 or 3 times. We had feedback from the different buildings. Really, there's not a whole lot of leeway in the calendar for next year. Unfortunately, we're still handcuffed by the state law that says we can't start, before that certain date. So what it does is it makes our semesters not balance up. So we're about 10 days short on the first semester for the second semester, and that really only impacts the secondary level when it comes to semester courses, but it's still impactful if you're teaching a semester course. So we're pretty limited on what we can do there. We talked about a 2-week Christmas break, which people like, depending on the status of pandemic at that point, we may need to revise it again, but right now the recommendation is not to go for a full 2 weeks just because of that. We're already 10 days imbalanced in the 2 semesters. So it's kind of the conclusion that we came up with. It's not the best scenario, but we're kind of handcuffed on what we can do. So
Any rumors that the state's going to allow schools to start sooner?
So they did this year. They waived that. However, I was kind of taken aback. I was in a meeting with the Commissioner of Education, and she was not in favor of that. So their thought process is if you want to extend your summer school, you can teach summer school all the way up until basically a day before the fall term starts, which I don't know how that benefits anybody, but that was their philosophy, and So it didn't sound like she was going to push for that. So the state board is probably not going to push for it. It's just a trickle effect. It's not going to happen. So there's not going to be any lobbying to change that calendar date at all. So I still think it's ironic that we preach local control when it comes to the virus, but we don't preach local control when it comes to starting school. We're stuck with it. So the cruel irony of legislation.
Paul, with this year with going teaching online or virtual, and next year with the snow days built in that we have there, and we may already be doing this, and I may be missing this, but is a snow day, can it be virtual and still count? And therefore, we can take that day and move that out a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good question, Doug. We have a lot more flexibility. So it's based, it used to be, it was based on the number of days in your school calendar. Now it's based on number of hours. So as long as you have 1,044 hours, you can pretty much do what you want. And so you are limited to 6, we call them AMI days, alternative methods of instruction. The virtual days, we're limited to 6 of those. And we can also, just have a snow day where we don't pick days up. But on the calendar itself, you have to demonstrate makeup days. It's a weird, again, it's just a weird piece of the legislation. So we don't even really use the makeup days anymore if we can avoid it. We try to use the AMI days or just the non-makeup days if we can, and make sure that we're over that 1,044 hours. Right now, I have no concerns that we'll go over the 1,044 because we're using the AMI days. But hopefully we don't have another Arctic blast hit in 2 weeks. So.
But we're only allowed 6 of those days?
You're allowed 6 AMI days, and then you have to start looking at your total number of hours. And so we had built into our calendar enough hours that we could excuse, I think it was 8, Susan, you might correct me on this, if it was 8 days, I think.
I believe
So
that's correct.
Yeah, I think we had 8 days of extra hours. And so we've used 5 of those. So we have 3, in essence, days that we would not have to make up. And then we have now 4 AMI days. So we still have a lot of play. And I will say this, in a normal year, I would prefer if we can use makeup days, just because I think instruction is that important. I think we can't speak out of both sides of our mouths. We can't say that instruction matters and then try to reduce the hours of instruction. Unfortunately, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And so if I can avoid using makeup days, I'm going to do that because it lessens the chance of the spread of the virus. And so, I think we have to look at it year by year and see how we can best serve our students and give them the education.
All right, any other questions or comments for Paul? Okay, I believe we have a motion and a second out there.
Nancy,
Yes.
Doug Alexander,
Yes, ma'am.
Doug Meyer,
Yes.
Brittany,
Yes.
Bing,
Yeah,
Cameron,
Yes.
Tina.
Yes.
Thank you.
MCC levy discussion?
Well, this is not an action item. This is just a discussion, but Bob Houston and I and Dr. Mike Schlegel at RAPEC have had a lot of conversation about this particular ballot issue that's going to appear on the April ballot. MCC is putting in a levy on the ballot, and I shared the sample ballot with you. It doesn't talk about the amount of increase. And it also includes our school district name. This is not, and you all might remember from our meeting that we had at the community center in the fall, where we were told we're not going to get a facility here. That's not in the plans, at least immediately. I think maybe some very long-term plans that might be, but the immediate impact is just to take the tax base and reduce tuition for students of ours that live in the district to attend MCC. But Dr. Slagle said that when he talked to Dr. Beatty, she essentially said that she needed our tax base because they're losing revenue. That concerns me greatly. And I think she's not made those same comments to me. She did make the same comments to Bob Houston. And so, as a board, I don't believe that we can come out and say that we oppose this. However, individually, I just want you all to have the information available to you. I don't like the fact they use our school district name, because the history behind that is that it used to be the school district had to place this item on the ballot, but they changed the statute. You might recall that was on the ballot a few years ago under the old statute, and the school district had to place that item on the ballot. And what concerns me about this is that our public is going to think that we place this item on the ballot because the ballot language is pretty vague. And so I know Bob's looked into some of that and had some of those same concerns, but that's my concern. Is it looks like it's our levy and it's not. And quite frankly, I'm having trouble supporting it, considering some of the conversation that's taking place with some of my professional colleagues. So,
Paul, if you read the ballot, it's all good and no bad.
yeah,
It doesn't talk about taxes. It does. We're going to get extra benefit for students, however many may go to MCC. And this is very disingenuous on Beatty's part after the conversation that she had with the community, 60 days ago?
right.
How do we, I know as a board we can't, but how do we get the facts in front of people?
That's a difficult conversation, Doug, because we're limited on what we can do. Whether it's for a ballot issue or against a ballot issue, we're limited on what we can do communication wise.
So individually, we need to take steps.
Yeah, because we can't use our communications as a school district come out in favor or opposed to a ballot. We have to say vote or don't. I mean, that's.
But yet she can use our name in her ballot.
Yeah.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the meeting that we had at the community center, it was specifically asked about taxes and the levy and things like that. And that answer was they weren't going to do anything like that just yet.
That's what I recall as well. And then I got a call from Bob probably a month later, and he was fuming because he heard the same thing and asked if I'd seen the ballot. And the language, and I said I hadn't heard anything. And then suddenly there it is. So.
I mean, I recall the question was asked very specifically and it was answered very specifically. That's what I recall.
Correct.
Okay.
That's my memory as well.
Can we challenge the ballot language? Because
I was going to ask that too, Bing.
if you're going to have a tax, which is or a levy, you have to state how much it's going to be per, 1,000 evaluation, how much money it's going to generate, where the money is going to go. And I just don't think, looking at the face of this, that this language is legal.
Well, and I that was my understanding too, Bing. But I know that Bob and the county have had their lawyers look at it and I, other than supporting them, I'm not sure what we can do. I don't know how it can be removed from the ballot, but again, I know Bob and I talk every week about it, so I know that he's pursuing it. I'm not sure to what to what
Well,
extent we can.
If this,
And my understanding was that
this-
we're already part
if this
of
would
the MCC
pass,
district.
No, we're not being. No.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I was gonna say, if this would pass, what would be the financial effect on the district's patrons? It doesn't say anything about a levy. It just says we will be attached to their district. It's
Right.
not saying it's a levy.
But it is.
Is it a levy, or are they just adding us into their boundaries?
By adding us into the boundaries, we are levied at that point.
And I think,
But we don't know at what percentage.
Would it be what they currently have levied for their existing?
I think so. Yeah.
I think that's information that's been, you have to do a lot of research on the Metropolitan Community website and dig into that. And in fact, that's how Bob found out some of that, and they were even going to place it. They hadn't even contacted us, if I understand correctly.
Yep.
So
This is
if I
so
may-
vague and
may-
hard to understand or even explain to anyone what it means.
Agreed. One question, if I may, for Tina, Paul, I guess. Can we, not coming out in opposing for or against, to come out as a neutral position, can we come out with a statement on our webpage or whatever that says that language was proposed, designed, this is all from Metropolitan Community College, that this is not coming from our school district nor the board.
We
So
can
it's
certainly do that.
not saying we're for or against, but
Right.
I kind of feel like we should put a statement out that says, that's not us. People can infer whatever they want and see that they're imposing that on us.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't bother me at all.
That's a
work
good
on
idea,
that.
Doug. Yeah.
That is a good idea.
Yeah. And maybe even put it in the paper. I just think it needs to be out there that we aren't the ones doing this, because especially since we just did all that work and got the bond and levy, and then people are going to think we're doing this too, and they are
Right.
not going to be happy.
Right.
Well, and after the
I
fact,
don't
when
know.
they find out there's a levy that's not spelled out in this verbiage, they're going to be really irritated.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I've been wondering, I don't know if Jill or somebody, or
She just put a thumbs up. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but
if Dwayne or Jill or somebody, or somebody, if we just propose some type of language that to help educate folks that is not us, the board, and trying to impose that.
Right. We can
And
do
then Paul,
that.
am I correct? And if it passes, then we can't get away from that levy ever. Is that correct?
I don't know. Bob did say that Belton was trying to, there was a force in Belton trying to get them out of that district. I think if they vote to get out of that district, they can, but I'm not sure. Bob was looking at that too. Part of the issue is the way that it's written is that it has to be continuous. And so this issue is going to be on the Raymore ballot as well. And it's going to say Harrisonville School District. And so, I think Bob's thinking is that it would get defeated there and then could pass in our school district. And then it wouldn't be continuous. And if it's not continuous, then they would be able to challenge it in court at that point. I think that's a worst case scenario, I think. But I agree with Doug. I think it's a good idea to get some information that this is not the school district promoting this in any way, shape, or form. So that we did not generate that.
And it will only be Harrisonville School District patrons voting on this, is that right?
No, it's
No?
Peculiar and Raytown vote on it too. So,
Raytown?
or not Raytown, Raymore, excuse me, Raymore. Yeah.
What were you saying, Paul, about it being continuous? So like if it has to come south geographically, and then if Raymore and Peculiar don't pass it, there's a gap.
Yes.
And so then we could be defeated that way.
Well, that's what Bob says, that it can be defeated. Yeah, at that point they can challenge it in court because it's not continuous. Yes, there's a gap.
I do feel that this is, I don't know. I will just say it that I don't feel that this was very well communicated, and it was not presented as such, nor implied from that meeting that anything like this. In fact, I thought there was going to be more communication with our district about if we want to go with them. So I feel like we as a district, or we as a board, have been circumvented from with that meeting.
Totally.
Well, someone used the word
I
disingenuous.
think we should call a news station. Blindsided would be more like it.
And I would add that, they have reached out to us to partner with us on some different things. So the high school is working on an agreement to do a dual credit academy. And then I know Jeanette's been working with them at the Career Center for some additional programming. So I know that those conversations have taken place, but the levy conversation was never part of that.
Well, and that was what was leading me to believe that we were part of that, of their territory, as they call it, because they're offering services to us and things like that. So that's where I got the idea we're already part of that group, and that's why they were extending these services to us.
No, they can offer them anywhere. I mean, in essence, they could offer services virtually to military personnel who are serving overseas. So that's what a lot of colleges do. It's virtual learning opportunities. It's also some accreditation through the Career Center, to give some of those students dual credit opportunities. Right now, we give students dual credit opportunities from Crowder College, State Fair Community College. So, just for an example, so it's to have an articulation agreement with those schools. But it's not, there's not a reduced tuition rate. So that's the benefit that you get from being in their district is a reduced tuition rate for our students.
However, I also feel that when we ran our last proposal, A&N, we were very forthright and upfront. People knew what it was going to cost, everything what we were going to do. And this, I don't think people realize. I just think it's, I don't think people realize the taxation aspect or the financial aspect on our patrons, but that's just me on this.
How could they know? There's nothing that spells it out. How could they know?
That's the frustration
Yes.
that I feel. Put it out there and be upfront with it. We did, believed in us, and we're fulfilling it. So for A&N, or I'm sorry, A&N, I&N. I keep saying A&N, I&N. So anyway, I appreciate you putting that on there and having that discussion on this.
Well, and if we can find
Yes.
some figure or some dollar amount that this will cost, that information needs to be disseminated somehow, because as Doug's comment,
Totally.
when people take a look and find out what they actually voted for and what they thought they were voting for, and our name's on it, it's going to be real ugly, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Have there been any committees formed to support it or oppose it? I know if the MCC's got to have some kind of committee, just like we did.
I don't know, me. Again, there's a lot of lack of information with everything around it. So.
All right, well, if there's no other conversation about that, let's move on to the strategic plan update.
So obviously the building components we'll get into. I wanted to discuss the academic side again of the strategic plan and how we're continuing to improve. So if you look at the information that Christy shared, you know, you see the trend lines. If you look at the trend line on the left, which is the percent above proficient, that number you want to go up. And then the other graph you want it to go down is the below proficient. So I think Christy did a nice job presenting that information. It is fairly recent data, so it's been within the last 3 years. So we've used the screener, and now we're working to incorporate our resources that we've purchased again within the last 2 to 3 years, and how those fit, and we're able to analyze that data easily. And I think she did a really good job of presenting that. That's where we're going academically and how we can monitor what we're doing. You know, too many years we've looked at one piece of data, which is the map data. And this is the message we're trying to get across to the State Board of Education and the state legislature, that what you want to look for is student growth, each individual kid or cohort, how that group is growing throughout a school year. And now we have the tools to track that. And then we can also break it down by individual skills where they need to improve on. So it's just a lot more relevant data, internal data, that hopefully leads to external improvements in that end of year exams too. But again, it's just a lot more relevant, a lot more information that's pertinent to our district and our kids. And I think that we'll be able to share that with you at least every, at the beginning of the school year, the middle of the year, at the end of the year. We can review that data and kind of see how our kids are performing. So that's our goal with that. And it ties into the strategic plan. That's part of that. We talk about the report card, and so that'll be a piece of that. So it's very relevant to what we're doing. So
I'm assuming more and more districts are using something like Fastbridge. Would that be an accurate statement?
it's very accurate, Tina. So Pleasant Hill also uses Fastbridge. A lot of districts use, I think NWA is something that they use. iReady is another thing. There's different vendors, of course, that fit different districts. That's the one that we selected that we felt like was most reflective of what we needed. But that's the argument we're having with the discussion that we're having with the state board and the legislature right now is we don't want to just look at one piece of data from the end of the year. We can't make any instructional changes or service any kids that way. This is better for kids to see the progress that they make over a year is important. And so, yes, I would assume every school district is doing something similar to this. But that is the relevant data. That's where the rubber meets the road in academic circles, really. So.
Oh, I know that from a teacher standpoint, it's extra work probably.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate what they're doing. As you just said, it gives us the ability to intervene with those students quicker, to measure more timely, do a better job of education. Is there any way that districts that are using these tools can band together and approach the state as a unified front?
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going, Doug.
So we've done that, Doug, and I'll tell you the history of that goes back There was an assessment consortium that was established when I was superintendent of East Buchanan. It's probably been about 8 years ago when they started looking at MSIP 6 and trying to push that. It just really, I wouldn't say it gained a lot of traction until recently, but our Cass County group met with Kim Bailey, who is one of the board members. She's from Ray-Pec, and she was a board member there. Now she's on the state board, and she was very interested and it was exceptional to have her there. And she listened to that conversation. The Greater Kansas City Superintendents Association, we met with Dr. Van Dieven, the state commissioner, and had this same conversation. So those conversations are happening. It's getting the right people to pull the trigger and say that we're going to do it this way. And I think we would all of the, when I say we would, I mean all of the school districts in Missouri, or at least a majority of them, would support if the state wanted to use one vendor. And let's say it wasn't Fastbridge, let's say it was NWA. I think most of us would support that because it is a lot more relevant data. I think that's the direction we're going. So I'm glad that we're doing it at least internally first. So.
Anything else on the strategic plan update? Do you have anything else, Paul, on the
No.
strategic plan update? No.
That's it.
Okay. Moving on to the construction management update.
I won't add a whole lot because we have the gentleman on here that will be talking to you about the construction management process, where we're at. And that's Brandon Stanley, who'll be on here in just a minute. I did want to put in there that Deb has developed a spreadsheet that kind of shows you where the expenditures are and where we're looking, and she'll keep track of those. She does a really good job of tracking the revenues and expenditures on our side too. So we're just sharing that information with you too. So that's all I have.
I just had a question about there were two CCC tabs, and one of them was for the nursing edition broken out. Is that because of the grant involved with that, or that you're hoping to use for that? Is that the reason why it's broken out like that?
Give me just a second. You looking at the Excel spreadsheet?
Yes. One of them was for the nursing edition by itself.
Yep. Yeah, the reason that's broken out, yes, is because of the grant. We have to make sure we track the grant expenditures and that we don't spend over on that. So.
Okay.
Because that was not part of the original bond package. So we're making sure that we want to make sure we don't spend over that and use bond money for what it wasn't intended for. So.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to the long-term pay for substitute building nurse, we need a motion.
This is being so moved.
Do we have a second?
Brittany, second.
Okay.
Let's see here. Is Jason still on here? Jason, did you want to talk about this, or do you want me to talk about this? He's muted, I think, Sue.
There we go.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, just everything's in that memo as it is. We don't have long-term subs very often, especially with nurses. It was just brought to our attention. We did some changes to the salary, I think last year or the year prior, and kind of set at $12.50 an hour for all of our nurse subs. And This year we've had to have a long-term there, and it just kind of brought to our attention what we're paying that person in comparison to what we pay in other areas. And so this would be a recommendation to, keep it consistent to be in step one, like what we did with the teachers, of the salary schedule that it belongs to. So it'd be step one of the LPN schedule.
All right, any questions for Jason?
So it's my understanding that that will only go into effect if they are there for longer than 10 days. Is that right?
That is correct. Yep. Which this year we have had a long-term sub because of COVID. Tonya has been our COVID contact tracer and took on those duties. So we've had a long-term sub filling in the building. And so we have had somebody pretty much full-time. They're not there every day, but I would say most every day they are here. So that's how it came to attention.
Okay.
Would we be retroing this person to stay back to match this?
I don't believe so. I don't know. That's not necessarily a question I can answer on whether we can do that or not.
You want to ask Deb? I've asked her to unmute. I would think they'd already been paid. Deb, are you still on?
Yeah, I would say not. I guess I would have to look at Missouri law for sure, but if it's something that we are just implementing the rate now, I can't see that we would go back on that.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good practice. I would agree with them.
Service has already been rendered per se.
Okay.
It will go in effect for the rest of this. I mean, for the rest of this year and any future long-term subs we have.
Is this person still with the district in that long-term category?
Yes.
Okay, so like effective tomorrow, they'll get this increase in pay going forward.
Correct.
Gotcha.
All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. I believe we're ready to vote.
Nancy?
Yes.
Doug Alexander?
Yes, ma'am.
Doug Meyer?
Yes.
Brittany?
Yes.
Bing?
Yes.
Cameron?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes. Approval of phase one bond project bids. We need a motion.
Meyer, so moved.
Second.
All right.
So I've got Brandon Stanley here with us. I'm assuming Brandon's going to be the one giving this information, but there we go. Brandon, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can. So fire away. You're on.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Everybody, my name is Brandon Stanley with Newkirk Novak Construction, and I have John Novak on the call with me tonight. I'm going to be talking you guys through the first two bond packages for your upcoming bond work. Before I get to that, I'm going to kind of give you a rundown of what's happened in the past and how we got to where we're at today. So as everybody's aware, over the last 6-8 months or so, the district administration has been working with Halston Miller Architects to develop the scope of work and the contract documents for your first round of construction projects. Those drawings came to a conclusion at the end of the year. And in December, we started to engage your local subcontractor community. So working with Bing, Harrisonville Chamber, Paul and Jason from the district, we had some initial subcontractor engagement meetings. Those were held at the Chamber of Commerce. We also had a Zoom meeting. We advertised in the Harrisonville paper, as well as the chamber and district websites to get the local subcontractor market engaged and energized, because we knew from very upfront that local engagement was very important to the district. The documents, so drawings and specifications, were completed by Hollis and Miller early January. We then took those documents, which consisted of the Early Childhood Center, the Cass Career Center, the elementary school, and the middle school, and we put together 2 bid packages. Bid package 1 consisted of 3 buildings, the middle school, early childhood, and Harrison Elementary. Bid package 2, or phase 2, was the Career Center. We bid those out to the market. Obviously blanketed the local subcontractor community again because they knew it was coming, and then also broadened that net contractors to basically the greater Kansas City area. We invited approximately 750 subcontractors to bid your projects. We took bids on both phase 1 and phase 2 on February 4th. And on that, I don't know, can you guys share that, the 2-page document, or do you guys want me to? The bid tab?
I think
They've got that, Brandon.
Okay.
They've got-
on there.
You guys can just reference it then. So you can see on those 2 pages, there was scopes of work, and the scopes of work are listed over there on the left-hand side. So examples of the scopes of work would be concrete, masonry, asphalt, earthwork, etc. Package 1, there was 23 scopes of work. We received 85 bids across those 23 scopes of work, which is an average of 3.7 bids per scope. That's very, very good. Phase 2, package 2, was 21 scopes of work. We received 94 bids across those 21 scopes for an average of 4.5 bids per scope. So normal construction averages is what we want to maintain is at least 3 bids per scope. So you were above what we like to maintain. And I attribute a lot of that to the subcontractor kind of market right now. With COVID, there's not a lot of work out there. So a lot of focus was put on upcoming bond projects, particularly schoolwork. And that was very well received by the market. And you have some very attractive projects. Also, the timing of that, as you guys know, construction-wise, we're going to be looking to start this, weather permitting, within the next month. And these projects go through the summer. So this is a lot, this is a lot of work for a lot of guys that they definitely want to get. So it's a very attractive package. Looping back to the local input, local subcontractors, we received 5 bids from local subcontractors. So I think that was a great success. And we are definitely looking at utilizing 1, maybe 2 of your local subcontractors for some of this work. So that's not been determined 100% yet, but definitely looking at funneling some of that money back into your local subcontractor community. With the dollars and the way that the bids came in, I'm also happy to say that these projects overall came in under budget. And that is based off of the estimates that we've been having throughout the last 6 months with Hollis and Miller and working through the different phases of this project. So overall, from a budgetary standpoint, we are looking good. And some of those dollars could be rolled forward into future bond projects, i.e. next year. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. Anything you guys want to discuss on these 2 packages for this evening?
Hey, Brandon.
Yes, I had a question.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I was just curious if you could give an example of what the alternates include on some of these categories, like demolition. What sort of alternate is in there for that? And under the general trades, there's quite a large allowance for alternates. What is included with those?
Not a problem. So the way Hollis and Miller drew this, and it was part of the design of the project, was we had what was called a base bid. So this was work that the district knew from a programming standpoint, you definitely wanted to include in the job. It was stuff, kind of the gotta have stuff. Anything that would be kind of a nice to have or would be a great addition to the projects was allocated as an alternate. Alternate being when we bid the project out is an alternate scope of work or additional scope of work It could also be a deductive scope of work because there's deduct alternates as well, depending on the way it's written. That would allow us the flexibility on bid take to adjust to hit a budget. That's kind of the whole reason alternates exist, is to allow you to adjust the scope of work at bid day or post bid day so that you can easily maintain a budget. And the beauty about this, the good thing about this is that number that you guys are approving tonight, the 12.3 million, includes all the alternates. So it's all the kind of wishful thinking or things that would be nice to have. Some of those examples, as you were discussing, demolition, for instance, Harrisonville Elementary School, we are extending kind of that front office and staff. It's kind of an extended scope of work and redoing some of their admin spaces. So additional demolition would be required to do that renovation. General trades was the other one you brought up. General trades, think of general trades as carpentry. So anytime that we're adding additional work, there is additional casework or countertops, in-wall type wood products in the wall, ceiling tile, acoustical panels, that sort of thing. Anything carpentry related would be general trades. So same thing as like elementary school, there's additive work there because you are adding additional work to the project. Some of the other ones like the middle school, for instance, had an alternate to replace one of the boilers. So in that case, it would be strictly just a mechanical alternate, right? Because they're just swapping out the boiler. So all in all, there was, across both packages, there was about 13 alternates, and about every single building had an alternate. So it can be very diverse as to what you're looking at.
So at this point, are we planning on doing all those alternates because it came in under bid? Is that what I hear you saying?
Yes, ma'am. Right now, all the alternates are being accepted.
Okay. I had another question about why the bonds and insurance amount was separated from the regular bid. Is that, I don't know. I just didn't understand why it was separate from each bid. I mean, each bid has to include that in their bid. So you pulled every single bond and insurance amount out of each separate bid and put it in this total amount at the bottom?
So two ways. So the individual bids themselves, each subcontractor would be holding their own general liability insurance, but no bonding. Right. The insurance line that you're referencing down below is our Newkirk Novak Construction's general liability insurance. We, as the construction manager at risk, are holding the bonds for the entire project, not the subcontractors. So we will be pulling the performance and payment bond. We will be pulling the builder's risk insurance and general liability insurance for the total for the total dollar value of the GMP, not our subcontractors. That's why it's below the line.
Are you saying that none of the subcontractors will be having liability insurance?
No, they will have liability insurance for their own scope, but then we are also pulling liability for the entire project ourselves as well. Because they're liable for their own work that they're putting in place, and likewise, we are liable for the entire project. It's an extra layer of protection for the district.
So you're pulling the, okay. And then can you explain what the NNCP general conditions are? What are those?
That is our staff. So my time, my superintendent's time, any of our laborers' time on site for general cleanup, dumpsters, temporary protection, temporary fence. Basically, it's dollars to Newkirk Novak for the construction management of the project.
So that's on top of the percentage amount of the contract.
It is It's not a, say that again? It's a percentage amount?
No, I said it's this $547,000 amount is on top of, in addition to the, I can't remember the percent you guys were, 1.95 or 2.95. what-
You're
I
referencing
don't
the
remember.
fee line. Yes, ma'am. So the line at the very bottom is fee.
Yeah.
That is basically cost of work. It's the cost
Yes.
for us to do this work. So yes, that's an addition to.
Okay. All righty. That answers my questions. I just like explanations for these line items.
No problem.
Bing, did you
Brandon,
have something?
where would we see the bids that are, or the winning bids from like our local contractors when you pick those? Where would those be listed?
Once we finalize Bing, who we're going to be utilizing for each scope, I can make public to the board, if you guys wish, the winning bidders that were local and their dollar values for those bids, if you're interested.
Definitely.
What'd you say, Bing?
I said definitely interested. in knowing who
Yes,
those
I can
are.
do that. Absolutely.
All right. Does anybody else have any more questions? All right. We didn't do a motion on this, did we?
We have done a motion in a
We
second.
have done a motion. Okay,
Doug Meyer motion and Cameron seconded.
thank you.
You're welcome. You ready to vote?
I believe we are.
Nancy,
Yes.
Doug A,
Yes.
Doug Gibb,
Yes.
Brittany,
Yes.
Bing,
Yes,
Cameron,
Yes.
Tina.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, mowing bid, we need a motion.
So moved.
Was that Brittany?
Yep.
Thank you.
Do we have a second?
Nancy, second.
Okay,
Can I ask who is Excalibur? Who's the owner?
Mike Johnson, Natalie Johnson.
And he was the only one to bid.
Yeah, we had other bidders that showed up, or potential bidders, other vendors that showed up to the pre-bid meeting, but yes, that was the only bid.
you cut out on the.
Did
last
they
part.
say, was there any explanation given as to why those two that showed up didn't turn a bid in?
No.
Hmm.
I get a point of clarification on Mr. Johnson. He's an employee of ABCO, correct?
Correct.
I thought ABCO was going to take over the maintenance and the landscaping aspect.
They don't do landscaping, they do the maintenance.
Okay, so as an employee of them, when is this work that he's going to do, or his company going to do? Is it while he's employed with them? Is it going to be on the weekends? Is it his own
Well,
time?
So if there's additional work that needs to be done beyond his hours, Mike does it, but typically he's got his crew does most of the work. So Brandon Johnson, his son, who's a senior, is gonna take over the company. So I'm sure Mike will operate some of the business side of it, helping his son out, but really Brandon does a majority of the work. So
But Excalibur had the bid last year, correct?
yeah, they've had it for a while, and the bid is actually saving us money, so it's less than what our current agreement is.
So is
Or
Did
is
you
there any kind of
say,
conflict
I
of
couldn't hear you.
interest?
Did you say it's less?
Correct, Nancy.
Is there any potential conflict of interest here or
Well,
information?
the way that we issued the bids, because I think Jason and I wanted to make sure that that was worked out, because I think there potentially was before, but because the fact that it's a set amount each month, there's not potential for that.
So in this,
What?
Mike Johnson, he would not be doing anything associated with the landscaping aspect during normal business hours.
Correct.
He hardly ever mows or does anything himself out there anyway, so it's usually his entire crew that's doing it.
Right.
I just find it amazing that with all the mowing outfits around that we only got one bid. Amazing. Okay.
Well, I think the last time it was bid, there were multiple bidders, but he underbid them by so much that I think that's probably what happened. So.
All right, are there any other questions or comments?
And this is for a 1-year contract.
Right, with renewables, right.
And we'd have to vote on the renewing or extending, correct?
I'm not sure. Not all agreements work that way. Sometimes they roll over.
I'm asking Deb to unmute. I think she did that contract.
Yeah.
Deb, are you still there?
I don't think that the contract states that it has to be board approved for the renewals if we extend it for additional years. I don't have it in front of me, so I can't
Okay, I'm pulling it up. Hang on just a second.
recall for sure.
From a 1 year beginning March 1st, 2021, with 2 possible renewal periods unless terminated by the district earlier pursuant to the terms of the agreement. With 2 renewals, contract will effectively run through March or February 29, 2024.
Right. So typically that's a rolling renewal unless we have an issue. So.
It's not really stated in the agreement about the 1 year.
Yeah, it's 1C. Under scope of work, it's the very last thing.
Oh, yeah. With 2 possible renewal periods, that kind of leaves it up in the air.
And also we can terminate correctly if we
That's the issue is essentially it's essentially up to us if we want to terminate. So
30-day written notice, I believe I read in there. Yeah. Number 8 says we can do a 30-day written notice if we want to terminate it.
Yes.
Does this also include snow removal?
no,
So who does that?
we do it ourselves generally, but if we are sometimes we need additional help, so we hire out. Because our equipment's breaking down, so, but no, essentially we do it ourselves.
And that's not part of the ABCO work then?
Yes, it is.
It is. Now you can see maybe where I was getting confused.
Yeah.
All right, are there any other questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Nancy,
Yes.
Doug Alexander,
Yes.
Doug Meyer,
Yes.
Brittany,
Yes.
Bing,
Yes.
Cameron,
Yes.
Tina.
Yes.
Thank you.
Resolution to authorize selling general obligation bonds. We need a motion.
Meyer, so moved.
Do you have a second?
Nancy, go ahead.
Nancy, you seconding?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, Paul.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to Brad, who's here, and Susan, if you want to.
I've asked him to unmute.
Okay.
All right, very nice to see you all this evening. We have the bonds lined up with investors subject to the board approval this evening. We have great news based on the strength of the municipal bond market, which is the most favorable that we've seen in over 60 years, a continuation from this past summer when we issued the first installment of 10 million. The market has remained near all-time lows. And in fact, due to the lack of competing bonds out there, we were able to push the yields even lower than we first anticipated to get much lower reoffered yields, which generates more premium for your projects. So subject to board approval based on the structure this evening, the final reoffering premium is over $2 million. That's $2,084,679. And similar to the last installment, so we split out, the voters approved 22,700,000. We issued the first installment of 10 million last summer. And now we're issuing the second installment of 10 million now. And then that will leave 2,700,000 outstanding. And so by splitting it up into 3 installments, it's not starting the clock on all of that interest expense at one time. And so that saves over $400,000 of interest expense by doing this split of 10, 10, and 2.7. And so we've got in the series of attachments we sent, we have the executive summary that shows the first installment had a premium of 1,752,000. This installment has 2,084,000. So in total, we're anticipating you'll have 24,171,000 for your projects. And that includes using 2,060,000 to prepay some lease certificates to free up additional operating funds. So overall, it's much better than what we first anticipated when we first put the issue on the ballot last January, before COVID had the impact on interest rates. In the first set of attachments for the board packet numbers file, we've got the proposed structure of this set of $10 million. The maturities are March 1st, 2030 through March 1st, 2036. The coupon rate is 5%, but we have various reoffered yields of 0.7% to 0.8% on the bonds. And so what that is factoring in the $2 million premium the investors are paying to get the 5% interest rate. The price to the call is effectively 0.7% to 0.8%. And so on the debt service schedule, page 4, that calculates factoring in that $2 million premium the investors are paying to get the 5% interest rate. The effective interest rate on this issue is just 0.738%. And so that's about 20 basis points lower than what we anticipated just back in mid-January. And so that produced 108,000 by being 20 basis points lower of just 0.7 to 0.8. We thought that might be 0.9 to 1%. So overall, effectively just 0.738% on this $10 million bond issue. The next Schedule 4A is the pricing summary, which just goes through that premium. The school only repays the 10 million, but the investors are paying the price of over 120%. And so the dollar price column, the investors are paying the district $12,084,679, whereas the school only repays the $10 million. And so factoring that in, that's where we net the $2,084,000 of premium the investors are paying. And so when we're in this environment, just like over the summer, where we're near these all-time low interest rates, the main purchasers of school bonds are banks in Missouri. And that's another thing that's helped us get such a favorable structure with these low yields, is we have participation from the Commerce Bank and also Country Club Bank on this financing. And so that's what helped achieve those very low yields while just maintaining a call feature of March 1st, 2026. The YTM column, it stands for yield to maturity on the pricing summary. It's a somewhat counterintuitive number. It's the worst case scenario number. It's 2.765 to 3.26. That assumes you never refinance or prepay the bonds. And so the yield to maturity, if we didn't have a call feature, the yields would just be the yield to maturity. So the longer your call feature, the more premium is generated. And so the lower that number would get. But if you didn't even have a call feature, the yields, which is what the financing is priced on, the 0.7, 0.8, if the bonds were non-callable, you would just have a yield. You wouldn't even have a yield to maturity. So it's somewhat counterintuitive, and we'll see that on the comparison of interest rates. The next page is the sources and uses of funds, Schedule 4B. So on light blue, we had the first installment from August 3rd. Then in yellow, we have the final structure proposed for board approval this evening. Highlighting this is 10 million with the $2 million of premium. So 11,954,000 will be deposited in your construction fund on March 4th, which is when this installment of 10 million will close and the money will be wired to your local bank account. The next sheet of paper, we have an updated statement of cash flows, which just lines out the revenues derived from the district's $1.07 debt service fund levy. We had that ballot language structured with a 10-cent rollback in the debt service fund to accommodate the increase in the operating fund levy. So in green, we have the revenues derived from that $1.07 debt service fund levy. Then to the right of that, we have the payments on all of the district's outstanding bond issues. And the two columns we like to focus on is the purple column, your balances in your debt service count. And to the right of that in the dark blue, all of your bond payments totaled. And we've blown those up to see them a bit better on the next page. And so overall, the district's in a great position. In that purple column, your balances are the amount that's left over after you've made your payments on all your outstanding bond issues. And so we've actually included in here the remaining 2.7 million that can be issued as early as January 1st, 2022. And so overall, the purple column, your balances are in a very healthy position. And then they grow to where you'll be in a position for perhaps another no tax increase bond issue within about 5 years. We're very conservative in those projections. We're assuming just a growth rate of 2% each year. And we're also not assuming any refinancings of either of the first two $10 million bond issues. But if your assessed valuation grows more than 2%, which the district has been, or if we're able to refinance any of your outstanding issues, it would just improve these figures and put you in a stronger position. But we anticipate just with your current debt service fund levy, your revenues are more than sufficient for the payments on all 22.7 million, and you'll be in a position for another issue probably within 5 years. The last item that I will touch on is the comparison of interest rates. Anytime we're proposing final interest rates on a financing, we like to show how your proposed rates stack up compared to some of the others in the Missouri market. And so one of the things that's nice is the timing. We always planned on doing this installment of 10 million. Anytime we had to wait until January, just because in order for financing to be bank qualified, a school can't issue more than 10 million in any calendar year. And so bank qualified is the banks who purchase the bonds get to deduct 80% of their carrying costs on the funds they use to purchase the financing. And so we knew we'd have to wait till January when we issued the first 10 million in August, but we wanted to be ahead of the upcoming April election when other schools have financings to get approved by the voters in a couple months. There will be a lot more competition and other issues out there for investors, and rates typically go up slightly when there is that competition, but the market's been relatively quiet, and so there's not as much competition for investors. So we're able to push these reoffered yields very low. And so we have, on the comparison of interest rates, your proposed rates of 5% with your reoffered yields of 0.7, 0.75, and 0.8, compared to some others in the Missouri market. We compare on those yields, your 0.7% very favorably to Webb City School District. Their financing was structured at a 3% interest rate, but their yield to their call date was 1.13 compared to your 0.7. Then where it lines up in 2034, your yield is 0.75 to 1.17. And then to the right of that, the only other financing outstanding that's been done relatively soon, not underwritten by our firm, was a competitive sale for Max Creek School District. The winning bidder on that was Country Club Bank. So that was structured without premiums, and those yields were in 2032, they were flat 1%, your yield's 0.7. Then they're at 1.1% where you're at 0.75. So overall, very, very attractive reoffered yields. It's important to note also, Webb City's financing, their call features longer, March 1st, 2029, compared to your call feature March 1st, 2026. And then Max Creek's call feature is 1 year further out, March 1st, 2027, compared to your call date of March 1st, 2026. Ozark School District, that's in orange. That financing was non-callable, so there is no third yield to maturity number. They had a 5% structure to generate premiums similar to yours. A year earlier than your financing in 2031, they were 5% to yield 1.17, whereas later on, you're just 5% to yield 0.7. So much lower yields. And once again, that's just attributable to the strong support by the community banks, Commerce Bank, Country Club Bank, purchasing parts of the financing to help achieve those low yields, but also a shorter call feature of March 1st, 2026. So if rates remain favorable, you'll be in a position to make prepayments on this financing or refinance it if rates stay low, which the Federal Reserve's committed to keeping rates low for the time being as we make our way out of the pandemic to support the economy. So if we get a few years from now, this could work out nicely for a refinancing, in addition to getting $2 million of premium for your projects. Are there any questions at this point at all? Not I'll turn it over to Wesley, who will go through the last few pieces of information in the packet.
Hello, it's good to see everybody again. I will start with the closing procedures. And as Brad said, it's going to close on March the 4th. And items 2 and 3 detail all the specific amounts and the account numbers and where all the money will flow on that day. And skip to number 4. And as soon as all the transactions are complete, Mr. Hart will call the district and let Mr. Minching know. And then the final page of that is the sources and uses of funds that Brad went over a few minutes ago. The next document is the official statement. And this is the financial information and financial data and just information about the district that is given to the potential investors. The third document is the actual resolution that requires board approval if you want to proceed tonight. I'll go over a few of the important parts on it, just as we did last time. On page 2, the paragraph with all capital letters is a summary of the entire resolution, authorizes the issuance of the $10 million and then has the exact ballot language in there, shows what the projects will be, or what the proceeds will be spent on. On page 5, section 2.2 is a description of the bonds. And again, it lists the maturity dates and the amounts of principal, the coupon rate, and the yield. On page 10, section 3.1 specifies that they are redeemable at your option beginning March 1st, 2026. So you can do it in whole or in part, no penalty, completely at the discretion of the district. And page 26, section 11.5 is a section that specifies that they are bank qualified and tax exempt. The final document is the draft news release, and it details everything we discussed here tonight. And mentions the 2 local banks that participated and the fact that it's AA+ rated. And again, it's a draft news release and you're free to use it, revise it, use it however you need to. So any questions for any of those documents?
None for me. All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. So if there are no questions and we've got a motion and a second, we need to vote.
Brittany,
Yes.
Doug Meyer,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Doug Alexander,
Yes.
Cameron,
Yes.
Bing,
Yes.
Tina.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I will be at the district on Thursday at 10:45 to get the legal signed, if that still works with both Susan and Tina.
Yes.
Okay, great. We'll see you then.
All right.
Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Brad. Thanks, Dr. Townsend.
Thanks, Paul.
All right. With all of that being said, we need a motion to adjourn.
Did we have surplus property to go through?
It was on consent.
Oh, it was in the consent. Okay.
Okay, we need a motion.
I
So
move
moved.
to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
You guys are all over that
We'll all
tonight.
fight over this one.
Nancy,
Yeah.
Nancy,
Yes.
Cameron,
Yes.
Brittany,
Yes.
Doug Meyer,
Yes.
Doug Alexander,
Yes.
Bing,
Yes.
Tina.
Yes.
Thank you.
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you all.
Good one.
Thank you.
Stay warm.